this guide, we will go over all of the actions the samurai learns from level 50 to 90 in order. We will go over how each action is meant to be used, and when applicable, the recommended way to use it. We will also summarize changes to the rotation at level 60, 70 and 80. In the summary, we will take time to outline both an opener and how it leads into the general rotation, and also briefly go over stat priorities. I will assume you have already seen my primer, which covers the level 50 experience specifically, and I will also assume that you are acquainted with abbreviations like GCD, oGCD and weaving. If either of these aspects are not familiar to you, please view the corresponding videos in the top right corner. Before we go through level gained actions, let's briefly cover changes introduced with Endwalker. Gecko and Kasha now have damage boosting positional requirements, so you should use Gecko from behind an enemy when possible, and Kasha from the side when possible. When playing solo, you might find True North useful to avoid these requirements. The AoE combo finishers Mangetsu and Oka now apply the same buffs as Jinpu and Shifu respectively, so you can now skip these single target GCDs in an AoE fight. Additionally, these buffs are now known as Fugetsu for the damage buff and Fuka for the attack speed buff. Meikyo Shisui now also makes Gecko and Kasha apply Fugetsu and Fuka respectively. This enables you to open a fight faster or jumpstart after some downtime mid-combat. My recommended way to start is to open with Meikyo Shisui, Gecko, Higanbana, Kasha, Gecko, Hakase, Yukikase, Midare Setsugeka. For 2 targets, you can open 3-2 Tenkagoken with Gecko, Kasha, Tenkagoken, or use Higanbana after each finisher. For 3 or more targets, you use Mangetsu, Oka and Tenkagoken as usual. The reason we use Gecko first is because the damage bonus is applied to Higanbana, while the speed from Fuka does not affect it. NP no longer cancels your current combo, so you can freely use this when out of range from targets. Also, NP's range has been increased slightly. Feint now additionally reduces magic damage, so you can use it almost at any time and always have some benefit. Now then, at level 52, you gain access to the Kenki gauge and learn the ability Hisatsu Kaiten. Whenever you use Gecko, Kasha, Mangetsu, Oka or NP, you generate 5 Kenki. Yukikaze generates an extra 5 for a total of 10, and you can hold up to 100. If you take damage while Third Eye is active, you also generate 10 Kenki. So, if you can predict unavoidable damage, this can be incredibly powerful. Hisatsu Kaiten, which I will refer to as simply Kaiten, boosts your next weapon skill's damage by 50% at the cost of 20 Kenki. At this level, you should save all of your Kenki to boost EI jutsus. In fact, due to how small amounts of Kenki you generate currently, I would advise you to save 20 Kenki for Higanbana and only use Kaiten for Midare Setsugeka or Tenkagoken if you have 40 or more. This is because Higanbana is by far the most valuable option to spend it on, but typically you will generate at most 10 Kenki leading up to Higanbana, while Midare Setsugeka will generate precisely 20 leading up to it. The main way this changes your rotation is that you have to make this call to use Kaiten just before an EI jutsu. Remember, always use it for Higanbana if you have the option, but only use it on Midare Setsugeka or Tenkagoken if you have at least 40 Kenki. At level 54, you learn the ability Hisatsu Gyoten, shortened to simply Gyoten. At the cost of 10 Kenki, you dash quickly into melee range of your target. While incredibly convenient, at these levels, Kenki is so scarce and valuable that you should only use Gyoten if you're absolutely sure you will lose out on at least an entire GCD if you don't. In any other scenario, it is better to simply use NP as you run normally towards your target. At level 56, you learn the ability Hisatsu Yaten, shortened to Yaten. The exact reverse of Gyoten, this ability moves you away from your target for the same cost. Clever use of Yaten can let you sneak in an extra GCD before having to run away when a mechanic demands it. Additionally, Yaten also makes your next NP do a lot more damage, which in most cases you should make use of. Since NP itself produces 5 Kenki, Yaten is far less costly to use compared to Gyoten. If you do have excess Kenki, more than 20, Then you can use Yaten generously to practice the timing to avoid mechanics with it to gain a lot of extra damage over the course of a fight. At level 60, you learn the ability Meditate. The only purpose of this action is to use it at a point in a fight where you both cannot attack anything, but you are also safe to stand wherever you are. Every 3 seconds, it generates 10 Kenki, so when done perfectly, it can result in up to 50 Kenki over its duration. It is important to keep in mind that you should not use Meditate outside of this specific scenario. Even if it is incredibly useful to gain that much Kenki, simply repeatedly casting NP is much more valuable if there is an attackable target. Since level 50, you have gotten a bunch of Kenki tools, especially powerful being Kaiten, which boosts your next weapon skill immensely. As your combo finishers and NP generate Kenki, you should try to make sure to always keep 20 to Kaiten Higanbana. Once you have 40 or more, you can use Kaiten for your other EI jutsus, and if you have more than 20, you can also safely use Yaten NP for avoiding mechanics. Overall, your rotation is mostly unchanged, except for some extra buttons to sprinkle in between the main combos, and also enabling a lot more mobile utility options. At level 62, your Kenki generation is boosted to an absurd degree, and you learn Hitsat's Shinten, shortened to Shinten. At this level, all of your combo actions generate 5 Kenki, and those that already generated Kenki now generate an extra 5. Importantly, this includes NP. The net result is that any full single target 1-2 or 1-2-3 combo will generate 20 Kenki, enough to use Kaiten, making it easily possible to use it for every Iaijutsu you will ever use. This immense Kenki fountain you now have also makes it almost irrelevant that Gyoten costs Kenki, so you should use this dash in much more generously now, as long as it saves you time. Shinten is an oGCD attack that simply does damage to a single target and spends 25 Kenki. This is introduced as an option for what I will refer to as Kenki venting. If you have a large amount of Kenki and you know you won't need it for anything else, you can use Shinten in between your weapon skills to vent. At this level, when starting a boss fight from 0 Kenki, you may benefit greatly from starting with NP into Make Your Shisui to generate the extra 10 Kenki you need for the first Kaiten. This then leads into Gecko weaving Kaiten, Higanbana, Kasha, Gecko, Hakase, Yukikase weaving Kaiten Midare Setsugeka. At level 64, you learn the ability Hisatsu Kyuten, shortened Kyuten. This is an AoE alternative to Shinten that is superior on 3 or more targets. You simply use Kyuten instead for the exact same purposes if there are at least 3 targets that will get hit. At level 68, you learn the abilities Ikkishoten and Hagakure. Ikkishoten is a long cooldown that immediately grants you 50 Kenki, enabling you to start a fight with 50. This does enable you to skip that initial NP and still have enough Kenki for the first Kaiten if necessary. Aside from that, the Kenki from Ikkishoten will typically be spent on Shinten over the course of a fight at these levels. Adjust your opener to start with Make Your Shisui, Gecko, and weave Ikkishoten first, then Kaiten. Should there still be a significant amount of running to your target, then it is not a bad idea to still start with NP. Take note that while Make Your Shisui can be used outside of combat, Ikkishoten cannot, which is why we weave it after Gecko. Hagakure is a niche ability that gives you some control over your Zen. It spends all of your Zen as an oGCD to generate 10 Kenki per Zen spent. You should only use this ability if you are sure you know what you're planning to do with it. One example case you can use Hagakure for is in a dungeon or alliance raid. If you have 2 Zen, but both of your buffs have run out, then simply using Hagakure to enter a boss fight with a clean slate may be easier to deal with. At level 70, you learn the ability Hisatsu Guren, shortened Guren. As an oGCD, this does a large amount of damage in a line where the AoE component is half as powerful. On a 2-minute cooldown, this should be used whenever it is available. Fortunately, the cooldown lines up perfectly with Ikkishoten, so you should have no worries saving 25 Kenki for this attack. Make sure to only use Guren while affected by Fugetsu, as it is affected by the damage boost. Since level 60, you have acquired an incredible boost to your Kenki generation. While your general GCD rotation is mostly the same as always, Kenki is so abundant now that you should be able to use Kaiten for every EI jutsu without fail. When you have an overabundance of Kenki, remember to make use of Shinten, or Kyuten for AoE, to vent the excess. Your opener has also become significantly more explosive. Optionally start with NP and then use Make Your Shisui as you run up to your target. Then use Gekko and weave Ikkishoten and Kaiten. Then use Higanbana and after that use Kasha and weave Guren. Then finish the Make Your Shisui with another Gekko. At level 72, you learn the ability Hisatsu Senei, shortened Senei, which is a single target alternative to Guren, and they also share cooldown. Guren should be used for 3 or more targets, and otherwise use Senei. At level 74, you learn the trait Enhanced EI Jutsu, which reduces the cast time of EI Jutsus enough that you can fit a single oGCD after an EI Jutsu. This enables you to weave Senei just after Higanbana in the opener I mentioned before. Aside from that, this trait mostly just makes it a little more smooth to use EI Jutsus. At level 76, you learn the ability Tsubame Gaishi. This ability does nothing on its own, but turns into Kaishi Higanbana, Kaishi Goken or Kaishi Setsugeka immediately after you use one of these 3 EI Jutsus. You lose the opportunity to use Tsubame Gaishi if you use any other weapon skill, so the general process is to use them as the immediately following GCD, as all 3 are on the GCD despite being abilities. This also means that Kaiten will not work on them, however, they innately do the same potencies as the regular EI Jutsus with Kaiten. On single target, you should use Tsubame Gaishi on the first Midari Setsugeka you can, and generally use it on cooldown as it becomes available. You should under no circumstances ever use Tsubame Gaishi on Higanbana. It is simply too easy to produce a single Sen for this to ever be worth it. If you need to do 2 Higanbanas in quick succession, simply use Hakase Yukikase to do this. On AoE, you should use Tsubame Gaishi on Tenkagoken. Sometimes, Make Your Shisui naturally lines up to enable you to quickly get Midari Setsugeka just as Tsubame Gaishi becomes ready, but when this is not the case, keep in mind that it takes 8 GCDs to ready Midari Setsugeka normally. As such, if you already have 3 Sen, you can do Hakase Jinpu or Hakase Shifu to play for time by 2 GCDs. Yaten NP can also be used at a very small damage loss to play for 1 extra GCD. These tricks can be used if Tsubame Gaishi is going to be ready within up to 8 or 9 seconds, remembering that Midari Setsugeka takes a GCD itself. At level 78, Fugetsu and Fuka get a small boost to their effects. The only difference you should feel from this is that Fuka will make your GCD go slightly faster. At level 80, you learn the ability Showa, and the Kenki gauge is expanded to hold 3 meditation stacks. Whenever you use an EI Jutsu, you gain 1 stack. Every tick of meditation also grants a stack. Showa can be used to spend all 3 stacks as an oGCD. Keep in mind that Tsubame Gaishi does not grant these stacks. You should use Showa whenever it is available on the first oGCD opportunity. By design, there is a very low chance you will be able to gain meditation stacks back to back, so Showa does not need to be prioritized the highest. The 15-second cooldown can only be bypassed by using EI Jutsus inefficiently, in particular by using Make Your Shisui to use Higanbana 3 times in quick succession, which is not recommended. As such, you can mostly ignore the cooldown of Showa. Since level 70, you have gotten a single target alternative to Guren, that being Senei. After every 3rd EI Jutsu, you also have access to Showa as a single target oGCD strike. Every minute, you can use Tsubame Gaishi to do 2 Midari Setsugeka back to back, or Tenkagoken on AoE. Fugetsu and Fuka got a small boost, and your EI Jutsus take less time to cast. All this means that your opener can now be done as follows. Optionally NP and then make your Shisui into Gekko, weaving Ikkishoten and Kaiten. Higanbana and weave Senei. Then do Kasha, Gekko, Hakase, Yukikase weaving Kaiten, and then do Midari Setsugeka into Kaishi Setsugeka. At level 82, you learn the ability Showa 2, which is an AoE alternative to Showa 1 for 3 or more targets. Just like Kyuten, you simply use this ability instead on AoE. At level 84, Tsubame Gaishi can hold 2 charges. This means you can much more easily use Tsubame Gaishi whenever an opportunity to use it with Midari Setsugeka presents itself, without having to use fancy tricks to align it. At level 86, your AoE combo starter Fuga is permanently upgraded to Fuko. not to be confused with your attack speed buff Fu-Ka. Fu-Ko generates an extra 5 Kenki, so you now generate 20 Kenki with every AoE combo. Keep in mind that Fu-Ko is a circular AoE around your character, whereas Fu-Ga was a frontal cone attack. This upgrade mostly affects how you need to position yourself for your AoE rotation, but otherwise leaves it unchanged, since you already generated plenty of Kenki. At level 88, Make Your Shisui now also can hold 2 charges. The best way to make the most of this is to always make sure to only use Make Your Shisui when you can plan around using only Gecko or Kasha and EI Jutsus for its duration. This can either be done by using Gecko or Kasha, followed by Higanbana, and then Gecko and Kasha, or by activating Make Your Shisui after doing Hakase Yukikase. Since the charge system gives you nearly a full minute to plan this, you should now consistently be able to get these optimal Make Your Shisui sequences. At level 90, Ikishoten is upgraded to grant a 30-second buff that enables your new weapon skill Namikiri, which is a weapon skill that is functionally identical to an EI Jutsu, down to even granting a meditation stack. As such, you should make sure to use Kaiten before using Namikiri, and it should be used every time it is available. When Namikiri is used, it automatically changes into Kaishi Namikiri, which you should always use immediately after. Take note that Namikiri itself does not have a cooldown, and so its cooldown is directly tied to Ikishoten. As such, you have 30 seconds after every Ikishoten use to plan when Namikiri is best to use. For instance, you can use the first Namikiri in the opener discussed previously, immediately after the Midari Setsugeka Kaishi Setsugeka. To round off, let's first talk about an optimized opener, followed by more general rotation tips, and then finish off with a brief talk about stat priorities. As Samurai explicitly has no damage boosting cooldowns, the opener we have built on throughout this guide functions as the most efficient at using your cooldowns, meaning you make the most value of each cooldown when you cannot rely on your team to boost your damage. In a well-coordinated group, however, you can plan to use every single big cooldown you have in a single short burst window every minute. This is of course what would be considered the optimal rotation, which can be very difficult to perform to perfection, so it is perfectly fine to use the less rigorous and perfectionistic opener and rotation we have built on throughout this guide, until you feel ready for this. Without further ado, here is a less resource efficient but more bursty and perfectionistic opener, as well as its fixed rotation fit for a coordinated group. Up to 9 seconds before the battle begins, use Make Your Shisui. Start the fight with Gecko, and if you plan to use a tincture, a so-called burst potion, this is the time. Then use Kasha, weaving Ikishoten, and then use Yukikase and weave Kaiten, and do Midari Setsugeka, Kaishi Setsugeka, and weave Sene, as well as Make Your Shisui again. Then use Gecko and weave Kaiten into Higanbana, then do Kasha and weave Kaiten into Namikiri, Kaishi Namikiri, and weave Showa. Then another Gecko weaving Shinten, finally Hakase Yukikase weaving Kaiten, and finish off your opener with another Midari Setsugeka Kaishi Setsugeka. Now, in the downtime waiting for your cooldowns to ready again, you have enough time for a full Midari Setsugeka and the time to prepare 3 Sen for another one. Every minute you have 1 Make Your Shisui and 1 Tsubame Gaishi, and you have to reapply Higanbana. Every other minute you additionally have Sene, Ikishoten and Namikiri. In a coordinated setting, you should make sure to reach these burst windows exactly with 3 Sen ready and efficiently use all these cooldowns in a burst during your group's cooldowns. After your burst windows, except for the opener, you typically will do a full Midari Setsugeka and generate 3 Sen too quickly before it is time for the next minute's burst window. To deal with this, you can delay a number of GCDs by starting your cooldown period with a combination of these filler tricks shown on screen here. Showa, as well as Shinten for excess Kenki, should be spent as they come up, and it is not a requirement to save them for the burst windows. Anyway, the general rotation outside of a coordinated team is a lot more focused on optimizing your usage of your tools around the moment rather than fitting them in neat boxes. You can use all of your cooldowns as they come up, and remember that you can also use Ikishoten way in advance, as you do have 30 seconds to make use of Namikiri. This also applies to the coordinated rotation from before. For some players, the fixed nature and looping effect of the coordinated rotation may make it easier to perform with a lot of practice, whereas the more general rotation relies on being ready for the buttons that come up as they come up, making you a lot more flexible in a boss fight you don't know perfectly from start to finish. For 2 targets, the good old 3-tool Tenkagoken is still perfectly reliable. The only difference is that you simply add all of the cooldowns and tools you have learned through all these levels on top. You should still use Shoha 1, Sene and Shinten for 2 targets. You can quick start your 3-tool Tenkagoken with a very similar opener to the single target, where you make sure to skip Higanbana at first and use all of your big cooldowns. Once you have gone through all of them, if the target will still live long enough, use 2 Yukikase combos to apply Higanbana to each of them. For 3 or more targets, you only use your AoE combos and only Tenkagoken, and of course Ogi Namikiri. All the AoE versions of Kenki spenders, Guden, Kyuten and Shoha 2 should also be used. After that long talk about the rotation, let's go over stat priorities briefly. Keep in mind that in nearly every single case, item level beats out optimal secondary stats, so you should always prioritize higher item levels first, as long as the item has strength on it. After this, Samurai is perfectly capable of doing the entire cooldown period described in the coordinated group advice. Extra skill speed simply aligns the GCD better and fills out with more filler GCDs. The advantage to having more filler GCDs is of course that boss fights tend to make things go wrong or require you to move out of range at times, so you will sometimes miss out a GCD or 2. The recommended skill speed intervals to optimize around are shown on screen now. After that, your priority should be critical hit, and then determination may be weighted slightly above direct hit, but really these 2 stats are nearly identical in their damage potential. Remember that outside of the most cutting edge of group content, as long as your gear is somewhat up to date to the content you're doing, then you do not have to worry about getting the perfect stats at all. That is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, or perhaps find something a bit confusing, please leave a comment down below. Fun fact, in the start of Shadowbringers, Showa was very different. Channeling meditation stacked up a buff that would make Showa do more damage, and Showa was only available while channeling meditation, meaning that you not only had to channel meditation far in advance, but you also had to know where your target would be at the end, such that you could position yourself to use Showa. The action was changed quickly due to being almost completely unusable.